Welcome back to Reverso. Today we are calibrating our instruments for a very specific coordinate in space and time. So I want you to place yourself in August 1980.
The location is the Baltic coast. We're in Gdańsk, Poland.
And the atmosphere it's physical. It's really oppressive. There's this sticky, humid heat hanging over the whole city. You know, the kind that makes your shirt just stick to your back the moment you step outside. But it's not just the weather. The air smells of salt water, rusting metal, and that kind of industrial grease coming from the shipyards.
And underneath all that industrial smell, there's the scent of a society that's, well, it's decaying. We're looking at the Polish People's Republic in a state of really terminal economic crisis.
Right.
And to really understand why this moment matters, you have to get that the social contract of the communist regime had completely collapsed.
What was that contract really?
It was basically, you give us your freedom, we give you economic security. You won't be rich, but you'll have a job, you'll have an apartment, you'll have food.
And by 1980, that promise was broken.
Utterly broken. The shops are empty. And I mean, we're not talking about not finding your favorite brand of cereal. We're talking about vinegar and mustard being the only things on the shelves. People are standing in queues for 4, 5, 6 hours, sometimes longer, just to buy a piece of meat with a rationing card.
Wow.
Exactly. The country's foreign debt had just ballooned. It went from about $1 billion in 1971 to over $24 billion by 1980.
$24 billion. How did that happen?
Well, the first secretary at the time, a man named Edward Gierek, he had tried to modernize Poland on credit from the West. The idea was, build new factories, they'll produce goods, we'll sell them, and pay off the loans.
But it didn't work out.
It was a disaster. The money was just wasted on mismanagement, on corruption. So by the summer of 1980, the government does the only thing it thinks it can do to save the budget. They raise the price of food.
And you have to understand, in a totalitarian state, the price of ham isn't just market dynamics.
No. It's a political declaration. It is an admission of total failure. And the people were they were tired. They were exhausted by this propaganda of success they saw on television versus the grinding poverty they saw in their own kitchens.
Okay, so we have the setting. A hot, angry summer in Gdańsk. And the mission of this deep dive is to explore how all of this anger transformed into a movement that, well, eventually dismantled the Iron Curtain. But we're not going to do it through a dry list of dates. We're going to do it through the lens of a song.
Song called Mury.
Which translates to walls. It was performed by a man named Jacek Kaczmarski. And the story of this song, Mury, is really the story of the movement itself. It's a story of hope, but it's also a story of a really profound misunderstanding.
Right, because this is Reverso. We're always looking at the B-side of history.
Exactly.
And we are going to see how a song that was written as a warning against collective movements became the anthem of the biggest collective movement in the entire Soviet bloc.
It's an incredible story. But before we get to the music, we have to understand the silence that came before it. And we need to introduce the person who broke that silence.
Right.
And it wasn't an intellectual in a Warsaw cafe. It wasn't some general. It was a woman named Anna Walentynowicz.
Anna Walentynowicz. She is the figure who really anchors this entire story. In the historical record, you'll often see her called the Mother of Solidarity. But even that title, I think it's a bit reductive. She was a powerhouse.
Let's look at her profile. She had been working at the Lenin shipyard since 1950.
A long time.
A very long time. And she came from a really humble background. She was actually born in what is now Ukraine, orphaned at a young age, worked as a maid during the Second World War. When she got to the shipyard, she started as a welder.
A welder.
Yes. And later, she became a crane operator. And what's really important to note is that for a long time, she was a true believer in the system.
She was what they called a Stepanovite, right? Yes, a hero of socialist labor. This was a classic Soviet concept, named after the miner Alexei Stakhanov, who supposedly mined an impossible amount of coal in a single shift.
Propaganda, basically.
It was pure propaganda. The state used people like Anna as tools. She worked incredibly hard. She exceeded all her quotas, and her photo was in the newspapers. She genuinely believed that socialism was supposed to empower the worker.
But that belief is exactly what made her dangerous to the regime.
Precisely. Because she believed the ideology, she took it seriously. So when she saw corruption, supervisors stealing funds meant for the workers or unsafe working conditions, she spoke up.
She called them out on it.
She did. She didn't realize that in a corrupt system, the hero of labor is supposed to be a silent symbol on a poster, not an active critic on the factory floor.
So she goes from being a hero of the state to a dissident.
It's a classic story. She joined the Free Trade Unions of the Coast, the WZZ. Now, this was a tiny illegal organization. She became an editor and a distributor of their underground newsletter, Robotnik Wybrush. That means the coastal worker. She was openly challenging the authorities, right there in the shipyard.
And the authorities, they decided to make an example of her.
They did. On August 7, 1980, the management made a fatal calculation. Anna Walentynowicz was 5 months away from retirement.
5 months.
Just 5 months. And they fired her.
What was the official reason they gave?
Participation in illegal trade union activities. A disciplinary firing. They thought, if we cut off the head, the body will die. They thought the other workers would be scared into silence.
But they didn't understand the social fabric of that shipyard at all.
Not in the slightest. Anna wasn't just a name on a payroll. She was the woman who organized help for widows of workers who died. She was the one who went out and bought medicine for sick colleagues. She was, in a very real sense, the moral conscience of the docks.
So firing her wasn't a political move in their eyes.
No, it was a personal insult to every single worker in that plant. They had attacked one of their own.
So the spark is lit. August 14th, 1980.
The morning shift begins at 6 Sibber a.m. But the machines, they don't start. Members of the WZZ had managed to smuggle in leaflets overnight, demanding her reinstatement.
The strike begins.
It does. And it's crucial to look at what the initial demands were. They weren't asking for the fall of the government. Not yet. They had two main requests.
Okay, what were they?
A wage increase of 1,000 zlotys to offset those food price hikes we talked about. And
the immediate reinstatement of Anna Walentynowicz.
Exactly. Bring Anna back. That was the rallying cry.
It connects the big political picture to something very personal, very human.
It does. And as the strike gets underway, another figure enters the arena. A man who had also been fired from that same shipyard for activism 4 years earlier. An electrician?
Lewasa.
The man with the mustache. The future Nobel Peace Prize laureate. The accounts of his arrival are, they're part of the mythology now.
The standard story is that he jumped over the shipyard's perimeter fence, right?
That's the famous story. He jumped the fence to join the striking workers inside.
Is that actually accurate?
Well, there are conflicting accounts. Some sources suggest he might have arrived by a motorboat on the canal side, but the jump is the symbolic moment. It doesn't really matter how he got in.
Right.
He enters the shipyard, and because of his charisma and his history there, he very quickly takes charge of the strike committee.
Okay, so he's the leader now. But we have to slow down here, because what happens next is the first big reverso moment of this whole story. August 16th. Just 2 days into the strike.
Right. The management of the Lenin shipyard, they realize they are losing millions of dollars every single hour. The cranes aren't moving. So the director, a man named Klemens Inch, he decides to cut a deal.
He gives in.
He agrees to the wage increase. And he agrees to give Anna and Llach their jobs back.
So he's a capitulate.
Effectively, yes. And Lluís, standing on a bulldozer or an excavator, he announces victory. He tells the thousands of workers, we got what we wanted, the strike is over, go home.
And people actually started leaving.
They did. You have to imagine the relief. The workers began packing their bags. They were heading for the gates. They had won.
If they had walked out of those gates that afternoon, the history of the 20th century might look very, very different.
Absolutely. The Berlin Wall might have stood for another 20 years.
So who stopped them?
The women. Specifically, Anna Walentynowicz and a nurse named Alina Pienkowska, along with a tram driver named Henryka Krzywanos.
Why did they want to continue? I mean, they got what they wanted. They got their jobs back.
They realized the bigger picture. See, while the Lenin shipyard was the giant, dozens of smaller workplaces all over Gdansk, the public transport depot, the bakeries, smaller factories, they had all gone on strike in sympathy with the shipyard. So if the powerful shipyard workers went home, the management of those smaller places would just crush the remaining strikers. The police would move in. People would lose their jobs, maybe go to prison.
It would have been a betrayal of their allies.
A total betrayal. And Henryka Krzywanos, the tram driver, she rushed to the shipyard and she confronted Llach. She famously shouted at him, "If you abandon us, we will be lost." She literally stood in the gateway, blocking the exit.
And Anna, what was she doing?
Anna Walentynowicz and Alina Pienkowska literally ran to the gates. They slammed them shut against the flow of their own colleagues who were trying to leave. They stood there pleading with the workers not to go. They shouted, "We must stay. We must have a solidarity strike."
That word, solidarity.
That is the moment the concept was born. Not solidarity as a noun, but as a verb. in action. They weren't striking for themselves anymore. They were occupying the shipyard to protect people they didn't even know.
And Llach, he changed his mind.
He did. To his credit, he read the mood of the crowd. He recognized they were right. He turned the megaphone back on and declared a solidarity strike. The MKS, the Enterprise Strike Committee, was formed right then and there to represent all the striking factories as one single body.
So the workers stay inside. They lock the gates from the inside. They are now occupying a strategic industrial site in a Soviet satellite state. I mean, this is high treason.
It's a siege, but it was a very, very disciplined siege. They banned all alcohol in the shipyard.
Which in Poland is a big deal.
It's culturally significant and was probably very difficult to enforce, but they knew that if the government could film drunk workers, they could paint them as hooligans, as criminals.
So what did they do instead?
Instead, they had mass. Priests came into the shipyard to hear confessions, to give communion. The shipyard became this strange fortress of dignity.
And on the gate of this fortress, they hung 2 wooden boards, plywood really, written on with a marker pen.
The 21 demands.
These boards are now a UNESCO Memory of the World document. It's amazing. Yeah. Let's look at what they actually wrote, because this is basically the blueprint for the entire revolution.
The very first demand was the most radical. Point number 1. Acceptance of free trade unions independent of the Communist Party.
Why was that single point so incredibly radical?
Because the entire ideology of the Communist Party was based on the claim that they were the vanguard of the proletariat. They claimed they were the voice of the workers. Right. By demanding an independent union, the workers were saying very clearly, you do not represent us. It challenged the legitimacy of the entire state structure. It broke the party's monopoly on power.
Okay, let's look at point 3. Freedom of speech and publication.
This was huge. They demanded an end to censorship and the repression of independent publishers. They were essentially demanding that the truth be made legal.
And point 4.
Release of political prisoners. They were demanding amnesty for people who had been arrested in previous strikes, big ones in 1970 and 1976. So they were trying to heal these historical wounds.
Point 13 is really interesting because it attacks the sociology of the regime itself. Selection of management personnel based on qualifications, not party membership.
This went right at the heart of the nomenclatura system. In Poland, you didn't get to be a manager because you were good at your job. You became a manager because you were loyal to the party, regardless of competence.
And they also demanded what?
The abolition of special privileges for the police and the security services. They wanted to get rid of the special shops with the yellow curtains where the elite could buy ham and bananas while the workers were starving. It was about equality.
And finally, you get to point 21. Saturdays off.
A 5-day work week. It's such a human demand. It reminds us that these were regular people who just wanted a normal life. They wanted to be able to spend time with their families.
So the government was completely cornered. The strike had spread across the entire coast. Eventually, 10 million people joined this movement. The economy was paralyzed.
And the government blinked. On August 31st, 1980, they signed the GESC agreement. They agreed to all 21 demands. It was unprecedented. For the very first time in the Eastern Bloc, a communist government officially recognized an independent opposition group.
Which brings us to this brief, incredible period known as the Carnival of Solidarity. For about 16 months, Poland was effectively a free society operating inside a totalitarian shell.
But the shell was cracking, and the neighbors were watching. The Soviet Union was terrified that this Polish disease of freedom would spread to East Germany or Ukraine.
And this brings us to the next section, the context of repression, the winter.
The carnival ended very abruptly on the night of December 13th, 1981. General Wojciech Jaruzelski, the head of the Polish state, went on television and declared martial law. Stan Wojcicki.
Why did he do it?
Well, his claim, his justification for the rest of his life, was that he did it to prevent a Soviet invasion. The Brezhnev Doctrine was still in effect, and it stated that the Soviet Union had the right to intervene with military force if a socialist country was seen to be moving towards capitalism.
So he argued he had to crush solidarity himself.
Or the Red Army would do it, and it would be a bloodbath on the scale of Hungary in '56. That was his argument.
So on a Sunday morning, people in Poland woke up to a completely different country.
A different world. Snow on the ground. Temperatures well below freezing, and T-55 tanks standing on the street corners of Warsaw and Gdańsk. The borders were sealed. A strict curfew was imposed. But the most effective tactic was the information blackout. They cut the telephone lines.
All of them.
All of them. You couldn't call the fire department. You couldn't call your mother in another city. Solidarity was instantly decapitated because the leaders couldn't communicate with each other. They couldn't coordinate a response.
And then came the arrests.
Operation Azalea. In the middle of the night, security forces dragged thousands of activists out of their homes. Waszasa, Walentinovic, intellectuals, writers, artists. They were all taken to internment centers.
And it wasn't peaceful everywhere.
No. We have to remember the Łuczek coal mine in Silesia. The miners there refused to stop striking. The ZOMO, the militarized riot police, they stormed the mine.
And they used live ammunition.
They did. 9 miners were shot dead. It was a national tragedy that really defined the brutality of that era.
So solidarity is crushed. It's illegal again. The leaders are in prison. The movement has to go underground.
Right. And this is where the culture becomes the battlefield. This is where we need to talk about the music.
This is where we finally encounter Jacek Kaczmarski.
Exactly.
So who was he? What was his background?
He was a bard, a poet, a guitarist, a performer. He wasn't a worker from the shipyard. He was an intellectual. He was associated with the student movements and the cabaret scene in Warsaw. He played the guitar with this really aggressive, rhythmic strumming style that almost felt like a marching beat.
And the song that came to define this entire era is Mury.
Mury. Walls.
But Kaczmarski didn't actually write the melody. And this is really important for the context of Western culture because the melody comes from Spain.
Specifically from Catalonia. The music belongs to a song called L'Estaca, which means the stake, written by a Catalan singer named Lluís Llach in 1968.
Okay, so what was the context of L'Estaca?
It was a famous anti-fascist anthem against the dictatorship of Francisco Franco in Spain. The lyrics describe this rotten stake to which everyone in the village is tied. And the singer says, if I pull this way and you pull that way, it will fall, it will fall, it will fall. It's a very straightforward song about collective action bringing down a tyrant.
And Kaczmarski heard this song in 1978.
He heard a recording of a live concert. He didn't speak a word of Catalan, but what struck him was the sound of thousands of people in the audience singing the chorus along with Llach. He was just captivated by the power of that unison.
So it inspired him to write new words to that melody.
Yes, but, and here is the critical twist, the reverso. He didn't translate the lyrics. He wrote a reverso of the original song's meaning.
What do you mean?
He kept the stirring, martial, hopeful melody. But the lyrics he wrote were not a simple call to arms. They were a dark, philosophical analysis of what happens to an artist when their art is taken over by a crowd.
Let's break it down. Let's analyze the song Mury. It starts with a description of a singer, right?
Yes. Verse 1 describes this visionary, this prophet. He stands before the crowd. He sings to them about light, about hope, about tearing down the walls. And the crowd listens. They light thousands of candles. It's a very messianic, hopeful scene.
And then comes the chorus. This is the part that became the anthem of solidarity.
The chorus is incredibly powerful. In Polish, it goes, Wyrwi murem zabikrat, zerwi kadani poszambat, amuri runuru nuru, ipogzabi stary świat.
And as our focus for this deep dive requires, if we translate that to Spanish, what does it say?
Arranca los dientes de las rejas de los muros. Rompe las cadenas, rompe el látigo. Y los muros caerán, caerán, caerán y enterrarán al viejo mundo.
Tear the teeth of bars from the walls. It's such violent imagery. It's active. It's a command.
It is. And that is what the workers in the shipyard heard. That's what the activists heard. They heard the promise that if they acted together, the walls would fall and the old world, the communist world, would be buried forever.
And this became their signal.
Absolutely. Radio Solidarity, the underground radio station, used the whistling of this melody as their secret signal to let people know they were about to broadcast.
But the workers, the protesters, they effectively stopped listening there. They ignored the rest of the song.
They did because Kaczmarski wrote a final verse. And in that final verse, the entire perspective of the song shifts dramatically.
What happens?
The crowd grows massive. They realize their own strength. They start marching. They start destroying old monuments. But in their zeal, they turn on the individual. The lyrics say something like, he is with us. He is against us. Whoever is alone is our worst enemy.
The crowd becomes a mob.
Exactly. They start to demand total conformity. And the singer, the very one who inspired them in the first place, is left alone. He's silenced by the very noise that he created.
And the ending of the song, the final lines.
The melody of the powerful chorus returns, but the words are completely different. It is a profoundly pessimistic conclusion. In Polish, it's Amury rosi rosi rose shakushisas Si yo uno...
And in Spanish, that would be?
Y los muros crecían, crecían, crecían. La cadena se balanceaba a los pies.
And the walls grew.
The walls grew. The revolution creates new walls, walls of intolerance, walls of us versus them. Kaczmarski was issuing a warning that in the noble fight against a dictatorship, the movement itself can become dictatorial. It can suppress the individual in the name of the collective.
He later called it a Borges-like loof.
It is the deepest irony. He wrote a song about a crowd stealing a song and missing its point. And then the crowd Solidarity stole his song and completely missed its point.
Did he ever try to tell them? Did he try to correct them?
He did. He was in exile in France when martial law was declared, but he'd play concerts for the Polish diaspora, or later when he returned. When he would reach that sad, quiet ending and the walls grew, the audience would drown him out.
They just sing over him.
They would scream the happy chorus back at him, and the walls will fall. They simply refused to hear the warning.
Because at that point in history, they needed hope more than they needed a warning.
Exactly. You cannot build a revolution on existential dread and philosophical nuance. You need a slogan. You need certainty. So they took the incredible energy of the music and they just discarded the complex philosophy of the lyrics.
And in a way, that profound misunderstanding was actually necessary for the movement's survival.
It very likely was. That anthem, that misunderstood anthem, held them together during the dark underground years of the 1980s. People would whistle that tune on the street. It was a code. It meant, we are still here.
So let's talk about that underground period. From 1982 to 1988, how did a band organization actually survive that long?
Well, they had two major external allies. First, and perhaps most importantly, the Catholic Church. Pope John Paul II, Karol Wojtyła, was Polish, and his election was a massive morale boost.
His visit in 1979 is often cited as a turning point.
It was. He told a crowd of millions in Warsaw, "Be not afraid," and it broke the psychological barrier of fear. During the 80s, churches became sanctuaries. You could hold art exhibits, lectures, meetings in church basements where the secret police couldn't easily raid.
Okay, so the church was one ally, and the second?
The United States, specifically the CIA and the American labor unions, the AFL-CIO, under the Reagan administration.
What did they provide? It wasn't weapons, was it?
No, they realized they couldn't send weapons, but they could send information tools. This was brilliant. They smuggled in fax machines, offset printing presses, radio transmitters, even early personal computers.
And how did they smuggle them in?
Often hidden in shipments of humanitarian aid. A lot of it was channeled through those same church networks. This allowed Solidarity to publish hundreds of underground newspapers, journals, and books. They broke the state's monopoly on information. The government controlled the television, but Solidarity, through the samizdat, or underground press, controlled the mind of the public.
And by 1988, the situation on the ground had changed again.
The Polish economy was completely dead. Inflation was rampant. The shelves were even emptier than they were in 1980. And a new wave of strikes broke out, this time led by a younger generation who barely even remembered the first days of Solidarity.
And the geopolitical context had shifted dramatically.
Mikhail Gorbachev was in power in Moscow. Perestroika, glasnost. He had signaled to the satellite states in Eastern Europe that the Soviet tanks were not coming to save their communist regimes anymore. The Brezhnev Doctrine was dead.
So General Sherozilsky had a choice. Either drown the country in blood without any Soviet backup, or...
He chose to talk. This led to the famous roundtable talks Okrugostosh in the spring of 1989. The government sat down at a table with the very criminals and traitors they had imprisoned just years earlier, Wojtyła and other key figures like Tadeusz Mazowiecki and Czeka Kuro.
And they hammered out a deal.
They did. The deal was for partially free elections. This is a really key detail. The Communist Party guaranteed themselves 65% of the seats in the Civ, the lower house of parliament. Only 35% were actually open for free elections.
So they rigged it to ensure they stayed in power no matter what.
They thought so. They also agreed to create a new upper house, the Senate, with 100 seats, which would be fully and freely elected. They believed their total control of the media and their financial resources would secure a comfortable victory even in the free parts of the election. They were completely deluded about their own popularity.
June 4th, 1989. A day the world changed forever.
And it's funny, the world's attention was actually focused on the tanks in Tiananmen Square in China on that same day. But in Poland, the people went to the polls.
What were the results?
It was a political massacre for the party. In the Senate, the upper house, Solidarity candidates won 99 out of 100 seats.
Wait, 99 out of 100? Who was the one person who wasn't Solidarity?
An independent businessman named Henryk Stokosa. The The Communist Party won 0. Not one seat in the Senate.
That's incredible. And in the lower house, the SABE?
Solidarity won every single one of the 161 seats that they were allowed to contest. They didn't lose a single race.
So the legitimacy of the entire regime just evaporated overnight.
It did. The satellite parties, the puppet parties that had supported the communists for decades, they saw which way the wind was blowing and they switched sides. By August of 1989, Poland had its first non-communist prime minister in over 40 years, Tadeusz Mazowiecki.
When the walls fell.
A Mury runa. The prophecy of the chorus came true even if they ignored the rest of the song. And the success in Poland triggered the domino effect across all of Eastern Europe. Hungary opened its borders. The Berlin Wall fell in November. The Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia. The Romanian Revolution in December. It all started in that Gdańsk shipyard.
But this is reverso. We have to go back to that final ignored verse of the song. And the walls grew.
This is the somber part of the analysis. The victory was sweet, but the aftermath, for many, was bitter.
What happened to the key people?
The unity of solidarity fractured almost immediately. The us fell apart as soon as the them was gone. Lech Wałęsa became president, but his leadership style was very divisive. He entered into a chaotic political conflict, a war at the top with many of his former allies.
And what about Anna Walentinowicz? The spark that started it all.
She was pushed aside. She was a radical moralist. She couldn't accept the compromises of the Round Table. She believed that the elites of Solidarity had made a dirty deal with the communists over the heads of the workers they were supposed to represent. She felt deeply betrayed.
She lived in obscurity for a long time after that, didn't she?
She did. She became a fierce critic of the new capitalist Poland. She claimed that the walls of privilege had just been repainted, not destroyed. Tragically, she died in 2010 in the Smolensk air disaster that killed the Polish president and many other high-ranking officials.
And Jacek Kaczmarski.
Yeah.
The bard himself.
He remained an individualist to the very end. He actually wrote a sequel song called Mury 87.
What did that one say?
It was bitter. It was an angry song. He criticized the apathy of Polish society in the late 80s. He felt that people were just singing his song as a ritual, waiting for the walls to fall by magic rather than by their own effort. And after communism fell, he saw new walls, rising walls of money, of political hatred, of consumerism.
And he died very young.
He died of laryngeal cancer in 2004. He was only 47 years old. And he never really escaped the shadow of that one song. He always wanted to be remembered as a poet of the human condition, but history branded him forever as the bard of solidarity.
So we're left with this incredible paradox. A song about the danger of the crowd became the most powerful weapon of the crowd.
And it worked. That's the crazy lesson here. History is not a clean narrative. Sometimes a misunderstanding is more powerful than the truth. If the workers had stopped to contemplate the existential warning in that last verse, maybe they wouldn't have had the fire and the simple certainty to shut down the shipyard and change the world.
But that warning of the last verse, it's still there. It's still waiting for us in the silence after the chorus dies down.
Amori Rosie. The walls grew. It is a timeless reminder that freedom is not a permanent state you achieve. The external wall, the Iron Curtain, that can be torn down. But the internal walls, intolerance, fear, the desire to silence those we disagree with, those grow back very, very quickly if we aren't constantly vigilant.
That is the legacy of Mury. It is a song of victory and a song of caution, wrapped in the very same melody.
A perfect soundtrack for the 20th century.
If you want to explore more of the sounds that constructed our reality, please subscribe to Reverso. We will be back soon to flip the record and look at another track.
Listen closely.
On natchniony I młody był I nie policzyłby On im dodawał pieśnią sił, śpiewał, że blisko już świt. Świec tysiące palili mu, z nad głów podnosił się dym. Śpiewał, że czas by runął mur. Oni śpiewali wraz z nim. Wyrwij murom zęby krat, zerwij kajtany, połam bat, a mury runą, runą, runą i pogrzebią stary świat. padł, a mury runą, runą, runą i pogrzebią stary świat. Wkrótce na pamięć znali pieśń i sama melodia bez słów niosła ze sobą starą treść, dreszcze na wskroś serc i głów. Śpiewali więc, klaskali w rytm, jak wystrzał poklask ich brzmiał i ciążył łańcuch, zwlekał świt. On wciąż śpiewał i grał. Wyrwij murą zęby krat, zerwij kajdany, połam bat, a mury runą, runą, runą i pogrzebią stary świat. Wyrwij murą zęby krat, zerwij kajdany, połam bat, a mury runą, runą, runą i pogrzebią stary świat. Aż zobaczyli, ilu ich poczuli siłę i czas i z pieśnią, że już blisko świt, szli ulicami miast. Zwali pomniki i rwali bruk, ten z nami, ten przeciw nam. Kto sam, ten nasz najgorszy wróg. A śpiewak także był sam. Patrzył na równy tłumów marsz, milczał wsłuchany w kroków huk. A mury rosły, 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 łańcuch kołysał się u nóg. Patrzy na równy tłumów marsz, milczy wsłuchany